Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, everybody. It's a great pleasure of mine to be here tonight. My association with 1916 is through Éamonn Ceannt and the uilleann pipes. If I could tell you a bit about Éamonn Ceannt, he was born Edward Ceannt in Ballymoe on the Roscommon-Galway border in 1881. His father, James Ceannt, and Joanna Ceannt was the mother. He was a constable in the RIC. And when he was about 3 or 4, he went to live in RD, County Louth. His father was transferred there. And eventually, his father went to Drogheda, where he retired from the RIC when Éamonn Ceannt was about 10 or 11 years of age. At that time, he went to live in Dublin, in Drumcondra. And Éamonn Ceannt went to that bastion great school, O'Connell School in Richmond Street. And there, he finished his secondary education. O'Connell School is very famous with the Rising because Con Colbert and Sean Houston went to O'Connell School as well. And as a coincidence, the three of them were executed on the same day, the 8th of May, 1916. Éamonn Ceannt was a very shy child growing up. He was very musical. He was good at languages, French and German. And he, in around 1898, he graduated from school at top of his class. He was so shy that because he was top of his class, he had to make a speech on behalf of all the pupils. And he made a great speech, and his father is meant to have said, "My Éamonn will be good, will be great sometime." And he was true to his word. Éamonn Ceannt was lucky to be born at the time of the revival, Irish cultural revival, national culture, we called it. It was the time of the founding of the GAA, the Feis Ceoil. You had Lady Gregory, W.B. Yeats, and all these things were happening. And he was struck by this. And especially around 1898, there was the celebrations of the 1798 rebellion. And there were a lot of processions and marches. And he was very taken with this. Also at the same time, the Boer War was on. His brother, William Ceannt, was in the Dublin Fusiliers and was fighting out in the Boer War. And Éamonn himself got a Boer flag and put it up in his garden and was there for over a week. It was the first sign of his independent thinking and that he could think for himself. It was the first time he did anything against British imperialism. When he left school, he did the exam for Dublin Corporation, and he was delighted with this because the citizens of Dublin paid his wages and he didn't want to receive the Queen's shilling, as he said. It was a blessing in disguise that he worked in Dublin Corporation. I wouldn't say he had to work too hard at it, but it gave him a secure income and time to do all other activities. The great change in his life came when he joined the Gaelic League. Gaelic League eventually had over 600 branches in Ireland. And he didn't study Irish at school, but he took to Irish so well that within about 4 years he was one of the best tutors in Dublin. And he founded a club in Clontarf. At the same time, when he was in Dublin Corporation, he met a man who introduced him to the uilleann pipes, and he was really taken with this. So much so that he helped found the Pipers Club in Dublin in 1900. And that was to preserve and promote not alone the uilleann pipes, but bagpipes. Éamonn Ceannt was his first secretary of Napier, the Pipers Club. And like everything he did in life, he was very single-minded and dedicated. He got a magazine going, and what he did was he realized that the art of uilleann piping was dying and there were only a few pipers left. Most of them were in the workhouses. And one he became very friendly with was Martin Riley down in Spittal. In the Pipers Club, they encouraged these pipers, wherever was there, to come to Dublin and to perform for them, and they learned from them. As I say, he threw himself into piping, and he went to the National Library and he researched and started writing articles. He became an adjudicator at Feis and was really involved in Irish music. As I said to you, he realized, because I was from the time of the 1691, after the Battle of Aughrim, there were no pipers hardly left in Ireland. They were all wiped out. Actually, King William II, they arranged for the massacre of nearly 600 pipers and harpers. So there was no tradition of uilleann piping. As I said, he was afraid it was going to die out. The Irish war pipes, or the pipe moor, the way we play them had died out, and he was afraid. He was the one person that realised that this was a dying art. So we owe him a tremendous, he's left us a fantastic legacy. Éamonn Ceannt was a revolutionary as well. In about 1907, he joined Sinn Féin and Arthur Griffith, who had a great influence on young nationalists. And he realised by 1910, Éamonn Ceannt was a physical force man, that he would have to take up arms if he was going to change and help find the Irish Republic. Things rapidly went from there. He was sworn into the IRB in 1912, and he was helped to found the Irish Volunteers in Windsor in 1913. Everything he went into, he got to the top with his dedication. He was a very serious person. As somebody said, you never knew what was on Éamonn's mind. But having read about him, he was a very romantic person too, and really adored his wife. But as I said, from 1914, the start of the First World War, things really escalated with the Ulster Volunteers, and then the split in the Volunteers into the National Volunteers. And he was in the inner circle, he was in the War Council, and he was so highly thought of that during the Rising, he was given the job of defending the Western Union, which is St. James's Hospital as we know it, which was a 50-acre site. He's one of the most successful of the military leaders of the 1916. He ended up with his men in the Nurses' Night dormitory, and was hand-to-hand fighting on Easter Tuesday and Thursday. And his men really admired him because they never breached the barricades. Éamonn Ceannt surrendered Sunday after Easter Sunday. He was told he was still holding out, and he was eventually court-martialed and executed. He was so dedicated to everything he did, and I've learned to admire the man so much. He never deviated, and even his last letters were saying if it was all over again, he would never have surrendered. So with men like that, no wonder we have the Ireland today. We are so thankful to him for that. But we, as musicians, are so thankful because from him, the Pipers Club joined Jimmy Ennis, who the father of Seamus Ennis. The Rowsons all came from the Pipers Club. And eventually, in 1965, there was only about, they reckon, 100 uilleann pipers in Ireland. And uilleann was founded, and now there's nearly 5,000, we believe, all over the world. So we owe him a great gratitude because he was the step from nearly the wiping out of uilleann pipes and piping as we know it to the great success it has become today. So I'd like to play for you on his pipes a slow air called Limerick's Lament. 1700s was an awful time in this country. 1604, Battle of Kinsale, we had Mr. Cromwell in the 1640s, the Battle of the Boyne, 1690, and the Irish retreated, were beaten, and they ended up practically a year later in July 1691 in a field outside Ballinasloe at Aughrim Pass, where they were beaten. Over 7,000 Irish were slaughtered that day, and they retreated to Limerick on Patrick's Arsfield, where the Treaty of Limerick was signed in October 1691, and this is a lament about that.